Jean Cummings, let's talk about Indiana's plan to cut Planned Parenthood.
Yes, Indiana Governor Mitch Daniels became the first to sign a law that would block any state funding for Planned Parenthood. And, you know, this clearly is an agenda that's moving from state to state to state. These Republican governors, you know, they share information at conferences and among their staff. And we certainly saw with the legislation aimed at labor unions that it kind of became a little bit of a wildfire moving from state to state to state. And we'll see if this does as well. It was interesting that of all the governors that it was Mitch Daniels, because he had called for a timeout on social issues while he tried to really focus on the fiscal challenges facing his state. And, you know, with him discussing running for president, obviously he would take this onto the campaign trail as one credential. But there were lots of other governors that you would have thought would go first on this. So it was a little ironic that it was Mitch Daniels who went first.
So Planned Parenthood is rejecting opponents' claims that other organizations that do not receive any federal funding whatsoever can carry on the 3% of monies that are Planned Parenthoods that do go toward abortion, Michael. Is that true?
Well, I think Governor Daniels has he sent directives to state bureaucrats in this case that they need to refer people to other services, and, you know, he argues that they exist. Planned Parenthood, you know, does many other things, but they provide half of the abortions in Indiana.
But they do not use one drop of federal money. Is that
correct? The
correct?
argument made by supporters of this is that the money's fungible, that if you're providing federal money or, you know, through Medicaid and other things, that frees up money to do other things. That's the basic argument. But Daniels did not, by the way, seek this. He didn't propose the legislation, but he had very little choice but to support it, given the Republican dynamic.
And then early this morning, the Kansas legislature voted to prohibit any insurance companies from offering abortion coverage as part of general health plans, except when a woman's life is at risk, David.
You know, when the Republicans won the last election, and it was seen as the tide was moving back in their favor, you know, a lot of people thought this was based on that they'd come in and talk about the economy. What did Speaker Boehner say? Jobs, 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 jobs prior to the election. It's not just what's happening in Indiana and Kansas. We see this in the Congress here, too. So in their first acts, we're finding ways to go after Planned Parenthood, defunding it, but also doing things such as redefining the definition of rape. So to restrict people who are raped from getting access to federal funding for abortion. So that, you know, we haven't seen really a single jobs bill, but we've seen several attempts aimed at a woman's right to have an abortion. And again, they're doing this in all sorts of different ways. And by going after Planned Parenthood, they are no doubt going to make it less easy for women to get other health services, you know, cervical exams, breast exams. And they're just willing to say, we're fine with that.
Michael.
We are fine with that.
Well, I think that's some kind of not a correct description of what the Congress has done. I mean, the Congress the House led with H.R. 1, which was a budget measure. Most of the discussion that we had this morning related to how we're going to do the budget. I think Republicans have led with those issues. But pro-life people are a very important part of the Republican coalition, just like liberal groups are part of the Democratic coalition. And these kind of issues come up. This was the Indiana legislature that did this in Indiana. Daniels had a binary choice. He could support that or oppose it. And this was not a flip-flop. He's been pro-life his entire career.
But it's not quite that benign, because Daniels really is a very influential governor. He's a strong governor. And when his legislature wanted to move forward the anti-labor legislation that we've seen around the country, he told them, put it on the table. I don't want to go there. I've got other things to do. So clearly he could have sent a similar signal on this too.